everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on Mob Psycho Season 2, Episode 6. As I'm recording this, it is going to come out on Patreon the week before Christmas, but on YouTube, y'all are seeing this on Christmas Day. So if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If you're on Patreon, a week early, Merry Christmas. And if you don't, Happy Holidays. So I'll also have next week, because Episode 7 will premiere on Christmas Day on Patreon, and then on New Year's Day for YouTube. So it's going to be, we have 2 back-to-back episodes of Mob Psycho that are pretty special and festive for the holidays, right? I don't have a lot with the Reagan Thirst update. There'll probably be more next week, but I do have some comments, several comments I want to get to that kind of will make up for it. So before we get to the Reagan Thirst update, we have Doily says that there is a translation issue in episode 3 of Mob, saying that it's not that no one is able to stop him, it's that there's no one able to punish him. So I think that that's interesting, because Mob is a middle schooler, and the idea of somebody reprimanding him, that he's afraid that if he gets out of hand in the question mark form, there's going to be no one to reprimand him. And I'm like, that's interesting, right? HBanana7 says that Mob and Reagan, they are growing together in this series. It's not just Mob. And yeah, we've seen in this series that, yeah, Mob is growing. He's learning more about himself. He's entering into puberty and adolescence. But Reagan, who is this full-grown adult, has kind of realized some things about himself too. And he's a better person for being around Mob. I'm like, this warms my heart, right? And Reagan, I think it is worth noting that HBanana points this out, is that back in episode 3, Reagan did not want Mob to know about the curse on him, because Reagan doesn't want Mob to worry. Reagan's like, I'm an adult, I'll take care of it. I don't want this actual kid to have to deal with something that's in the adult world. He needs to be a kid. And so I really like that. I like the idea that HBanana, that Reagan, he's wanting to keep Mob innocent. And I'm like, which is great, right? Hippias Tenius says in episode 4 that Reagan, he gets, the joke is, he got money for the cab from Asagiri's father, but then he took a train ride instead, so he saved money. So it's like he kept the extra change, right? He had enough money to buy a cab, but he took the cheaper route so he keeps some money off it. So, and several of you commented on that as well, including at Marith 1202, which I'll talk about in a minute, but a con man through and through, right? A con man through and through. Taking the cab fare and getting the cheap train. I'm like, Reagan. And then Aerith 1202 said, same comment about the Reagan con thing, but also that's interesting that in most detective stories, there's a trope where the rich person gives the detective money to transport to where the crime is happening. And I was like, yeah, I've read several Sherlock stories, and that's kind of the case. They just pay for Sherlock to get there and solve the mystery, because rich reasons. But that was really cool to mention. I'm glad you did that. Four Paws talks about how Mob is similar to Dazai from Bungo Stray Dogs. And I don't want to give anything away from Bungo Stray Dogs. I love Bungo Stray Dogs. The 4th season is starting up in January, and I'm going to be watching it. I'm really excited. But I can see the similarities without spoiling anything. Both Mob and Dazai have these strong powers, and they could use them to hurt others quite easily, but they choose instead to use those powers to save people. And especially in light of last episode, episode 5, that definitely seems to be the case. So I thought that was really cool. And then finally, Mara talked about how Mob's spirit in episode 4 looks like an exodal. I think that's exodal. I think that's how you say it. Probably not right. It's a little creature. It's like swims and stuff, but it has like little tendrils coming out of its head. There's like a Pokemon based off of it. I've seen that animal before, and I was like, oh, that's super cute. So I agreed, it seems fitting for Mob, right? So before we go into this episode 6, we'll be halfway through season 2, if you can believe it. It was with season 1, I was like watching them one after the other. Like there'd be some days I'd be like, oh, I can't wait. I want to watch the next one. I am taking my time with this season because I know it's going to go by fast. And I want to savor it. Season 3 is going to be here before we know it, and then we won't have Mob anymore. And I love this show so much, I'm taking my time. So I've had to record a little bit ahead because I was gone on break, but now I'm back home, so I can take my time a little bit more with it. But before we start, we're going to do the Reagan Thirst update. And there are 3 pieces of media I want to show you all. The first is this really cute comic strip where Reagan sees a little frog keychain. He's like, oh, that seems like something that Mob would want. And so he ends up going to grab it, and some guy next to him is like, oh, well, I want the same one. And they kind of just look at each other like, who's going to get it? And then Mob is like, oh, she so, thank you. And Reagan's like, it's nothing. And then you find out that he threw salt in the guy's eyes to get Mob the keychain. Anything for Mob. So I thought that was really cute. And then since, it's that time of year, I really liked this image shared in the Discord of Reagan and Mob in like Santa Claus outfits, like eating on the strawberry shortcake. I like that Mob's Santa Claus outfit is like magenta. It's not red. It's like a pinkish red. And then he has like the blue cardigan sleeves, and then Reagan's full-blown Santa. I also like that Dimple Summit is in a little champagne glass with the eggnog. He's like just hanging out there like, like it's really, really cute. Right? But then this. Okay. So this was shared by AWZ on Twitter, and I've laughed so hard. I'm not going to include the clip itself because y'all need to go on YouTube and find this. It's not hard to find. I did like a quick search, and it's right. It's like the first thing that came up. But apparently there's this show called Molly of Denali, this kids show, and one of the animators decided to draw Reagan into the cartoon. But they obviously can't say it's Reagan because of copyright. But the character looks exactly like Reagan. Here's a picture, a screenshot from the kids show. And apparently in the kids show, the character's name is Clark Newman. But it's Reagan! That's literally Reagan, that animator. Apparently the animator was let go afterwards. I can't imagine why, because you're not supposed to do that. But I was like, that is amazing. And if you go on YouTube and type in Reagan Clark Clark Newman, it is the first thing that pops up is that like 10-second segment from YouTube. It is the funniest damn thing I've seen all week. And I was like, oh my God. I love when animators, bless y'all, for putting your jobs and careers on the line to sneak in a troll like that. So yeah, so basically I just imagine like, the Netflix adaptations where they give Japanese characters like ridiculous English names because we can't say the Japanese names apparently. I just imagine if they did a Netflix version of Mob Psycho, please don't get any ideas, Netflix, if you're watching, that they would name Reagan Clark Newman. My only thing is if they ever went so bold as to do a terrible made-for-TV live action in English, they have to name Reagan Clark Newman. There's no options at this point. They have no choice. But I thought that was absolutely hilarious, and so thank you for showing us that because that's great. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm ready for episode 6. This will be halfway through the season. Who knows what's going to happen, but in any case, we're going to start this episode and just see what we get, right? So we're going to start Mob Psycho 100, season 2, episode 6, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Oh my gosh. Merry Christmas. No, but seriously, part 1, it's a 2-parter episode. A 2-parter with Reagan character development. I guess we should have seen it coming, right? We should have seen it coming because we've spent the first half of this season taking what I like so far about this season. I'm so baffled by it is that we are 6 episodes into season 2. We are halfway through season 2. We've not really done any focus with Teru at all. No Teru focus, nothing with Sho, nothing with Claw, nothing really with Ritsu. It has been Mob and Reagan this entire season. And I feel like it's needed because season one we set up all of these characters and we set up things about them. But it's like, okay, well, where do you go to from the end of season 1, right? Because you established Mob and Reagan working together. Well, where you go to is that we spend the first 5 episodes of this season talking about Mob's character development and how Mob has grown up a lot in the last 5 episodes and realized a lot about himself. And now it's Reagan's turn. It's like, okay, because yeah, even from season 1, there's the concept that Reagan is using Mob. He's using Mob for his own means. But we've balanced it out the entire time, because even though Reagan's been using Mob, he's been giving him good advice, right? Seemingly good advice. But now it's like it's gotten to the point where Mob is growing up and Mob is becoming a young adult, and Reagan's insecurities and Reagan's kind of flaws are starting to come out. And Mob's working past his own flaws and accepting himself and becoming self-aware and growing as a person. And Reagan has kind of been kind of stagnant throughout this entire series. And now Reagan's become dependent upon Mob, is what's happened. Reagan is the one who's dependent on Mob. He's the one using Mob, but he needs Mob. And now Mob no longer needs Reagan. It's sort of that, like growing up and flying out of the nest. Mob is growing up and he's flying on his own and he doesn't necessarily need Reagan, right? And Reagan doesn't know how to deal with that because Reagan is lonely. And he does, in Mob coming into his life was something really positive for him, and it's impacted him heavily. And now that he's realized that Mob, and I think that a part of Reagan saw a lot of himself in Mob when they first met. Like, Reagan doesn't seem like the type, from what we know from this episode, he doesn't make friends and he doesn't have a lot of friends. And so it's kind of like, this whole time we've been like, man, he's really hanging out with this middle school kid. Doesn't he have friends of his own he can hang out with? Not really, no. And so he's just kind of really lonely. And he puts on this front of being really charismatic and having this really outgoing personality. But the fact of the matter is he's very much alone. And he, Mob kind of became someone that he saw himself in. He's like, oh, well, I know what Mob's going through because I've gone through it myself. But much like Mogami, Mob is not like Mogami, and Mob is not like Reagan. Mob is his own person. And he has friends. He has a really good support system and a really good friend circle. And Reagan and Mogami, it's so funny that we just got through with a Mogami arc dealing with him and how he thought Mob was just like him and trying to cultivate Mob to becoming like him. And Reagan doesn't want Mob to become like Reagan, but Reagan sought kind of comfort in the fact that him and Mob were similar, and Reagan had developed this kind of codependency on Mob. And now Mob's like, I don't need you anymore, master. I need to go out and do my own things and be with my friends. And the thing of it is, Mob has told Reagan since day one, he's like, stop doing this. And Reagan hasn't respected Mob enough to adhere to it. And now Mob's like, I'm done. I need some space. And so there's a part of me that's like, my heart was broken because I was like, no, I don't want Mob and Reagan to separate, because I think Reagan does give Mob good advice and he has been there for Mob. But I think that overall this has been for the better, because now Mob can become a better person and Reagan can become a better person. Do I think they're never going to work together? No, we still have like a season and a half. I think they are going to work together, but I feel like Mob is not going to work for Reagan anymore. I feel like Mob is like, I'm going to do my own thing and we'll be friends and I'll help you, but we each have to part ways and do our own thing first, and then we can work together then. Maybe we can work together in the future. But Reagan needs to find friends his own age. I think that's what this is getting to, is that Mob has found friends his own age and he's able to interact with them and do well. The Body Improvement Club is a freaking godsend. They're like the patron saints of Nakama, and I will praise them to the ends of the earth. But Reagan needs to find a friend his own age. He just does. He just does. And you'd think right now, Dimple's the closest thing for that to Reagan, and Dimple's a ghost. So Reagan needs to go meet friends his own age. And they don't need to be in a bar, because we established the problem of bar friends. He gets through with that. But Reagan needs to go out and find himself a friend. I really thought, the one psychic, I thought he could be Reagan's friend, but he seems kind of wary of Reagan still. And he's from far away. He lives like what is it? Oh, we'll get his name here in a little bit. But he lives from like a town way away. So he can't just go hang out with Reagan every day. Reagan needs a close friend, like a nearby one that's his own age, his late 20s, that Reagan can relate to and become friendsies with, that is not Mob, because that's no longer going to be a viable option, I feel. I feel like Mob and Reagan are not going to be separate forever, obviously. They're in too much official art together. But I do think that it's healthy that Mob is like, no, we need to distance ourselves and make this relationship healthy and not toxic anymore, because it's gotten toxic. And it's like, okay. But God, we need to talk about this episode, because we get like a ton of stuff about Reagan right off the bat. Like within the first like minute, we got so much on Reagan that it's kind of, this was definitely Reagan's episode, but it was Mob's too. We'll talk about the two of them. So I'll put Reagan over here, and I'll put Mob over here, and kind of where our two characters are at as far as that goes. So Reagan, we start out, of all places, at this like customer service telemarketing thing, right? Where they're always working there, and there's the water coolers, and it says it's Clincity super delicious next generation water dispenser. So they're basically, it's a water dispenser company. That's what they're selling. They're selling water dispensers. And there's a thing where there's a 5-minute phone call. It says the secret to successful walk-in sales is a smile. And they're like, thank you for your continued. This is basically like The Office. It's basically like The Office, except instead of selling paper products, they're selling water coolers, which is kind of hilarious in this ironic way that they're selling water coolers. And it's like The Office corporate life, but they're selling water coolers, which are used by office corporations. It's funny, right? But yeah. And they're like, oh, is that so? We'll make arrangements for you. And they're all in the suits and everything. And so what's interesting is that we have Reagan, and it looks like he's got the phone there. Like he was working there, but he's boxed all his stuff up. Okay. So Reagan had been working. He had been working as a customer service salesman for water coolers, which is so symbolic in itself, because water coolers are representations of people coming together and communicating over small talk. It's where people start to form relationships with one another, is over the water cooler. And he sold those. And so he's used to connecting people together and giving and selling a product that connects people, but he himself is by himself and alone and not able to make friends. I just, so that was 4 years ago, before he met Mob, right? So he would have been what, 24? Probably about 24 when he did that. And it shows him like getting up and taking all his things. And we see like all the people, they're all acting like Reagan, the smooth talking, the hair flipping, everything, like all the tricks of the trade. Reagan would have learned all of these from working at one of these places. It all makes sense, right? But he gathers all his stuff up and leaves, and then walks out of the office. Like he takes his stuff out and leaves from the area. Okay, so I was wondering, for a second in the reaction, I thought he was going into a new office I thought he was setting up his apartment. I thought his apartment was at the Clincity place, and I was like, what is happening? But no, he left. He quit his job and left, took all of his stuff, and got this little 1-bedroom apartment. And he says, I'll take it. So he moved into this little apartment here. And then we see, like, he's looking for jobs. Like, he quit his job, went and found this little tiny 1-bedroom apartment, and said, working with a fun staff daily to make quick day exciting, quick and easy money. Saturdays only 2 hours in the morning. Says working at a sushi shop, just packing sushi into containers, or working the register. Applicants with no experience welcome. Once or twice a week, 4-hour shifts are perfectly okay. Only weekdays until 5 p.m. Hourly pay of 1,800 yen. Pick your location. Like, there's all of these little things that are these little odd jobs, right? And he says, I wonder what I should do now. This is a whole world place for adults. 20,000 just for being hired. And so he sets him, but he took one of the water coolers with him. He took the water cooler with him, like as a token of him leaving the business. He took his own water cooler. The fact that he has a water cooler in his apartment is actually kind of amazing. And then those PJs, what the hell? But he's like, I ended up renting this place without having anything lined up. And then he sees the back of the magazine where it says, you can become a millionaire too. Your life will change by wearing this power stone. It brings you good luck. So he quit his job. So he quit, moved to an apartment, and then decided on a whim to try and be a psychic. Like that's the dream right there. That's the adult dream. But yeah, it's like Reagan didn't know what to do. And then he was like, well, I don't really like, it's like you wonder if he quit his job because he was just tired of being fake like that, or if he didn't like the setup or the system. And then he's like, I want to be my own self-made person, right? Yeah, just, oh my gosh. But yeah, and then we have the OP. So yeah, the whole thing there. So anyway, the theme of this season, your life is your own, right? You don't live it for anybody else but yourself. And Reagan kind of embodies that. But then we go to Mob, poor, lonely Whitey. That is, which Reagan is Asian, not Caucasian, so it's interesting. But we go back to Mob, the Body Improvement and Telepathy Club, where he's managed to do 35 push-ups. I mean, that's pretty good improvement for our boy Mob. I wanted to make note that when he was like doing the push-ups and the sweat was coming off him, it almost like touched down on the shadow of his face and almost resembled like the question mark face in that moment. It was kind of crazy. But yeah, 32, 33. And the Body Improvement Club, they're so happy. They're like, your muscles are evolving. You've gotten stronger than you were before. Like, it doesn't look like it at first, Mob, but it's like every little step of the way. And it's like, and you just can't help but feel good for Mob because he's doing great, right? He's getting better. Your efforts are paying off. And the Body Improvement Club, they're like the best people ever. They're like the friend group that you want to motivate you to do things because they're just so happy at every little improvement Mob takes. They know he's a cinnamon bun, right? And I love that on the blackboard there, it says squats 30 times 5, planks 5 minutes, side planks 10, leg lifts 10 times 3, leg raise. Oh my God. And Dimple's just sitting there watching like, okay, all right, I see it. I thought his workouts were a waste of time. But the way he's improving step by step will make him more confident as well. So we still don't know if Dimple has given up on his ideas of having Mob become this world-dominating force, but he has recognized that step by step, Mob is getting more confident and looking bolder. And I like that that's taken from the last 2 episodes, that Mob said that he is shaped by the people around him and that the people around him shapes him in certain directions. So I like that because he's been with the Body Improvement Club, they have been a positive force on him and they've really made him a better person. So the Body Improvement Club have been a positive source of change. And then we have the Telepathy Club. And the Telepathy Club, they're not exactly like a positive source of change as the Body Improvement Club, but the girl that's the president in them, they still provide an outlet of friendship, right? They're an outlet of friendship, which is positive. And then obviously he has his brother Ritsu that is positive as well. At this point, Reagan is the least positive influence on him right now, which is kind of crazy because last season we were all begging Reagan to like help Mob and for Mob to get help by Reagan. And now it's like the tides have changed a little bit, right? But Mob's looking so happy. He's like so happy. He's like such a little being. Like you can't help but feel when you see Mob smile like that, you can't help but feel so happy for him. You're like, that's right, Mob. And even Dimple's like heart grows 3 sizes. He's like, okay, he looks even bolder there. And I like the president's like, wow, Mob Coon's having a lot of fun. Oh, I know. She's like, toss him too. It's his birthday. And apparently it's everybody's birthdays. Apparently it's taking place in October, so it's everyone's birthday. But he's like, oh, no, that's okay. And they end up tossing him. I love that Goda appears by me. He's like, is it your birthday, Kishi Bayashi? I said Kobayashi, but it's Kishi Bayashi. And he's like, is it your birthday? And he's like, yeah. And they throw him. It's so cute. What a joyous day. Let us celebrate. And I love that the one guy at the Mohawk's like, it was my birthday last week too. Everybody's let's just all celebrate. It's so cute. And he's like, what? It was? And then the one guy's like, let's throw a birthday party. And he's like, let's go to a family restaurant. And they're like, nice idea, Saruda. He's like, nice idea. Like, I think that's so cute. They all go together as a group. It's really sweet. And even the president's like, okay. Meanwhile, so there's a sense of camaraderie with all of them. Meanwhile, and this is the thing, these people are all the same age. Mob is with his middle school friends. They're all forming groups and everything. And Mob, there's a benefit to Mob kind of going with the flow, is that he is respected by his peers, and his peers like him, and Mob's not like arrogant or selfish or snobby or anything about it. He just kind of goes with the group, and it's kind of cool. Reagan wants to be a standout. He wants to be his own man, and that's cool, but that kind of places you in a position where you're oftentimes by yourself. And so again, he's going back to the rock salt, Uyuni salt flats exorcism, right? And he's like, oh, excuse me, and he gets a phone call, and it's from somebody that needs a spirit exercised. And he's like, okay, I got this. He's like, I'm getting one job after another. And that's when he decides to call Mob. They're at the Guspo restaurant, right? And so it's Kijibayashi and Kumakawa's birthday. Kumakawa is the one with the mohawk. And they're just like blushing. And I love when they sing the birthday. They're like, happy birthday to you. It's really cute. Like, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. It's so adorable. They just have all the drinks and plates of fries. It's so cute. Like, it's adorable. They're just sitting there sharing everything. And so one thing that I like about the Telepathy Club president is that she's not girly. That's one thing I like. And that's such a weird thing to say, but I like that she's totally comfortable around all of them, hanging out, where she's got food all over her face, but she doesn't try to like hide it for the guys. She's like, nah, she's just like, I'm got my fries, I'm good to go. I like that she just doesn't try to put on appearances. She's like, this is what I am. I just want to find psychics. Help me out, Mob. Like, I do like the Telepathy Club president a lot. And she's pretty blunt and honest, too. She's like, I didn't think you'd stick with this club, Mob. I thought you were doing it just to spite us back in season 1. And the one guy's like, yeah, I thought he'd run away. But the Body Club people are like, no, Kageyama's persistent. And they're like, what goal do you have to accomplish? And like, if you keep at it for another 6 months, you'll reach the level of an average second-year middle schooler. And Goda's like, don't stop him with those simple goals. He's like, he has a much loftier goal in mind, I'm sure. And I love Goda, where he's like, I love the image of Goda and the other Body Improvement Club people, and they're like at the bottom of the mountain, like panting out of breath, and Mob's on a peak by himself. Goda's the only one still standing. Like, I like that Goda recognizes that Mob is special and that he's got a lot of latent talent, like deep within him, and he recognizes it. He's like, if we let our guards down, he'll surpass us before we know it. Maybe in more ways than one. And then the president, like, Mob's like, all like, oh, really? You think so? And the president's like, he just wants this girl to like him. That's all. And Mob says, well, that was it at first. But now, and we don't get to see it answered. But, so Goda has faith in Mob, right? He has faith in Mob. And the Telepathy Club president says that he's just doing it for Tsubomi. But Mob says it's more than that now. Mob says that he's getting stronger originally for Tsubomi. But now I think it's also for himself. Like, he's improving for himself to become a better person. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. That's good that he recognizes that he wants to become stronger for him. He's like, I want to become a better person. So, yeah, I kind of do want to impress her still, but that's not the only reason I'm doing it. I'm not just doing things for others. I'm doing it for myself as well. Again, he's taking the things from episodes 4 and 5 that Megumi was trying to tell him, and he's applying it to himself, but in a positive way. And I'm like, yes. And so we see that Mob has friends. He's improving himself. He's doing really good. The worst link at this point is that he's working for Reagan. And not that he's working for Reagan, but that Reagan's taking advantage of him and using him. And the Telepathy Club president says, I hope you haven't forgotten you're supposed to help me find other telepaths. And he's like, oh, you're still looking for them? And she's like, of course I am. That's the whole point of the club. I like that she gets up in his face and she's like, what do you think the point of this club I'm running is? And he's like, oh. And then the one guy says, more importantly, why don't we all go to karaoke? And she's like, more importantly. But I like the idea that they're all planning these fun activities. He's like, let's go to karaoke. And Mom's like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, oh, come on, it'll be really fun. And he says, a chance like this won't come along very often. And she's like, fine, we'll all go to karaoke. And she's like, what should I sing? And he's like, oh, you feeling shy, Mob? He's like, you'll be fine once you start singing. And then I don't picture Mob singing, but Mob kind of zones out. When he comes back, he's like, oh, well, it's been a while since I've done this sort of thing with people, just hanging out with people. He's like, it's so much fun. And that, of course, is when the phone rings. But yeah, the first half of this season, and even the last season, he was around people, but he wasn't hanging out with them having fun. It was like life or death situations. So this is like the first time he's really got to hang out with people his own age and have a good time. Like anytime he's with Reagan, the adventures have been fun for us to watch, but they've not really been, it's not much fun for a 28-year-old to hang out with a 14-year-old, and then they're not really having fun adventures, they're doing a job, right? So as entertaining for us, the audience, as it is for Mob, it's kind of like, well, you really need to find somebody your own age. And then that's when Reagan calls, of course. And Reagan, it's so hard not to be mad at Reagan in this moment, because it's like Mob has told him not to call him short notice. And he has several times over the past 2 seasons. Like, we've seen it happen, and Reagan just kind of ignores it. So Reagan, I fully believe that Reagan does love Mob. He loves Mob like his own kid, right? But at this point, he doesn't respect Mob as a young adult. That's the thing. He loves Mob. He wants Mob to be safe. He wants Mob to be safe, and he wants to help him as much as he can, like a parent would a kid. But he doesn't respect that Mob is able... He doesn't think that Mob has friends, because he thinks Mob's like him. He thinks Mob is like Reagan and does not have friends. And it's like, no, Mob actually is able to make friends and keep them. And Reagan's not been. So there is a big difference there, but Reagan doesn't see it, right? He just sees that Mob is like himself. And he's like, oh, well, you just want to hang out with me, right? And that's not the case. And he says, there's a spirit giving me some trouble. He's like, and then the thing about it is, and I love the screen slowly gets darker and darker in this moment, but the thing about it is that Mob says, Reagan says, I could totally deal with it myself, but there's been so much work lately. Like, Reagan's trying to sell the fact that he could handle it. And he's like, I'd rather not use too much of my power. And Mob, and you can tell Mob doesn't want to say this, but he's like, hey, can you handle things on your own today? Like, he's sweating buckets. He doesn't want to do this, but he's like, I'm having so much fun. I don't want to. And Reagan's like, what? He's like, I've asked you many times before not to summon me on such short notice. And then everybody at the table kind of starts to notice. He's like, what are you talking about? I bet you're free anyway. And Mob should have said, I'm not, and not gone. But Reagan doesn't give him a chance, and he just hangs up. And so Mob, you can tell, is so sad. And everybody there's like, oh, what's the matter? And I love that the president says it's that shady-ass masters of yours again. And he's like, a job came in, so I can't go to karaoke. And everybody, and he says, I'm really sorry for missing out on your birthdays. And everybody's super nice about it. They're like, oh, it's okay. They're like, you've done so much. They're like, it's fine. And Goda's like, hey, some things take priorities over others. Like, we'll hang out again another time. It's okay. Like, we understand. Like, everyone is so kind and considerate. And that makes this all the worse, because they were all okay with him leaving to go help Reagan. They're like, oh, it's fine. You do what you gotta do. But Reagan was not okay with him not doing the job that came up to be with his friends. And so it's just, you can see that it's about to go down. And it's something so simple. It was this little tofu spirit. It took Mob 5 seconds to do it. It took him. And Reagan was nice and thanked him, but it was something that was so simple. And I've been like, if I'd been Mob, I would have left and gone hang out and did karaoke with the others. But I would have left and done that. But then Reagan, as he's leaving and they're going down the stairs, Mob stops him and he finally just has enough as they're going there. And Mob just kind of, that's the breaking point. He's like, what's wrong? And Mob's like, I have a school and a private life. He's like, I've been doing this for fun. Because he's not making anything. He's making like chump change. Mob's like, I've been doing this for fun and because I like being with you, Reagan, as his master. But he's like, I've got other things now. I'm growing up. And he's like, so stop summoning me out of the blue. And Reagan says, you're just working out in that club of yours, right? And Mob's like, it's not just a club. He's like, or did you fall for another person jokingly asking you out? And I was like, that was really cruel. Like, you didn't need to point out the whole Emmy thing. Like, that was really mean. Because that did end up working out. But Reagan doesn't realize that Mob seriously has friends. And it's not just a club. He's like, you get taken advantage of so easily. But none of these guys are taking advantage of him. It's Reagan that's taking advantage of him. And Mob finally realizes that. It's that, what's that phrase? Don't meet your heroes because they won't turn out how you think they will be. Well, Mob's been working at someone he's admired this whole time, but now that he's getting older, Reagan kind of outs himself in this moment. Reagan outs him. Reagan's been a smooth talker and really good at having the gloss veneer over everything at this point. But in this moment of desperation, Reagan is afraid of losing Mob and being alone again, and he lets the ugly side of himself show, and Mob's like, oh no, you're not as wise and perfect as I thought you were, Master. This isn't gonna work. And he's like, and then he says, grow up, for crying out loud. But that's the thing that Reagan needed to do, right? The whole thing about grow up. It's funny because those words from the last season, we were praising Reagan for saying them to the Claw members. Like, yeah, you all need to grow up. But now it's Reagan's turn. It's like Reagan put on that facade that everything was fine on his end. But it is not. And I'm glad Mob stuck up for himself. I'm glad Mob was like, oh no. And Dimple's like, you're digging your own grave, but I'm not going to say anything. And he says, I don't know what you're doing with your schoolmates, but do they really understand you? He's like, we're saving lives here. And it's just Reagan getting desperate. He's like, you're making a difference helping me out. He's like, not to mention I'm your master. And I'm the biggest reasons you're able to control your powers. And it's like, no. It's like Reagan's helped him, yes. But Mob is the reason that Mob's able to control his powers. It's like Reagan and Dimple have been great, like, crutches and resources for him. And they've been there for him in a pinch. But they're not the reason that he can control his power. It's like, He's like, choose your social circle wisely, Mob. If they're getting in the way of your exorcism job, then get rid of them. And he says, when he said they didn't care about him, I was like, oh no. I was like, nope, that's not what you should have said, because they do care about him, especially the Body Improvement Club. And Mob he's like, they're just having fun mocking someone as wimpy as you. And in that moment, like, Reagan is projecting his own insecurities, right? He is just projecting his insecurities. And I'm sure that's the reason why he's been alone most of his life, because he can't keep a friend. He projects his insecurities, and then that person does what Mob does, and they leave. They leave and move on. And Reagan's been afraid that's going to happen with Mob, so he's been trying to cling to him, and this was the breaking point. And then he's like, I might have said too much. You did. Yeah. He's like, they're not mocking me. And he's like, oh, right. He's like, I'm starting to understand that not everything you say is true, Master. And then, dug his own grave. Reagan messed up. Yep. He's like, oh, come on, Mob, you must be tired. He's like, let's get some ramen on the way back. And he's like, I'm not being mocked, nor am I easily taken advantage of. And then that's it. And so, he's like, damn it, Mob. And then luckily the client that he promised, is not one that had an actual spirit be the problem. And so, yeah, Reagan realizes, he's like, I said too much. And he's like, but then again. And so, but this is the part that's really sad, is that Reagan, he's like, Reagan is self-aware that he goofed. He's self-aware that he messed up. But then he says he shouldn't have anyone he can talk to about his problems other than me. But that's not true. Reagan had developed this codependency on Mob, and Reagan had become dependent on Mob for his own sake. Not even for the business, just for himself. He's like, I liked giving advice to Mob. I liked talking to him and offering him advice. And the idea that he could get that from someone else makes Reagan upset. And I love that shot of him with the pen where he's like, well, surely not, but if he cuts ties with me, he's going to end up alone again. But that's not true. It's the fact that Reagan is the one who's alone. Reagan's the one who's by himself. It's like, oh no. He's like, there's nothing to worry about. He'll be back. I know it. And maybe one day Mob will go back by the end of this season. Maybe whatever is going to happen the rest of this season, because we're halfway at this point. Which is a curious episode, to be halfway and then for your main two characters to have spent the whole season together, and then this is the point where they're like, nope. I foresee that Mob will eventually go back to work with Reagan, but Mob's going to be like, it's on my own terms. You're going to pay me more, and I don't need you to control me. I feel like that's what's going to happen. Something's going to happen the rest of the season that will get Mob to eventually go back to working for Reagan. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe Reagan will realize that Mob needs to go do his own thing, and he'll, alter the business, kind of like what he does here, where he doesn't need somebody working with him. But I do think that eventually, I think Mob and Reagan they're gonna be friends, but it's not gonna be this master-student relationship anymore. I think maybe that's the end of this. They're gonna be on more equal terms in terms of being acquaintances than being master-student. I guess we'll see. But yeah, Ritsu comes home and Mob's there hanging out. He's like, oh, you're home early. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, I've decided not to go to Master's place for a while. And he's like, oh, and I like that Ritsu's like, good. I like Ritsu's like, oh, well, great. You're not hanging out with that creepy guy? All right, cool. He's like, what brought this on? Like, Ritsu's totally fine with this. He's like, oh, great. You're not hanging out with him? Awesome. And Dimple says they got in a fight and he cut ties with him. And Mob says that's not it. He's like, we didn't get in a fight, but I gave it a lot of thought and made my decision. And he's like, I've been blindly following what Master Reagan says way too often. That's the thing. It's not that Mob's like, I didn't have a fight with him. We didn't cut ties. It's not like this. But Mob is self-aware as well that he's like, Mob is done blindly following Reagan. And he says he's done too often. Which to me signifies that he's not ready to be totally done working for Reagan, but he wants his space to sort things out, and he doesn't want to just be at his beck and call. And we cut back to the first season where, yeah, he just showed up wherever, whenever Reagan wanted to. And even at the start of this season, he just went wherever Reagan wanted to, did whatever he wanted to, and blindly listened to what he said without, getting a chance to get anything in edgewise. He's like, I felt things went better that way, so it was easier for me. And Mob acknowledges, he's like, it's kind of my fault too. Like, yeah, Reagan's been taking advantage of me, but he's like, I've been letting him because it was easy. He's like, I let Reagan take advantage because it was easy. Yeah, he's like, it was better just to go along with it than to make someone upset. But he's like, no. He's like, that's not... But... And then we cut back to the thing. He's like, grow up, for crying out loud. He's like, I realized I can't keep relying on him. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that Reagan is relying on Mob, and Mob realizes that he cannot keep relying on him. And again, that ties back to the end of season 1. Reagan had to step in and offer him that advice. And Mob was like, okay, I realize now what Reagan did for me, and that was great, but I can't have him come and save me at every turn. Mob's like, the thing with Mogami has taught me that Reagan's not going to be there for every battle. Dimple might be, but Reagan's not. So he's like, I need to be able to fight for myself. I can't rely on him to throw salt every 5 seconds. I can't do that. So I have to make it work for myself. He's like, so I thought I'd reconsider what I want to do a bit more. He's like, so I need some space to think. I need some breathing room. And then I can go from there. And Ritsu looks so proud of him. Ritsu's like, good for you, Mob. Good for you. You're growing up. You're making good adult decisions. That's what you should do. Because yeah, as much as I love Reagan and Mob together, it was starting to get toxic. And I was like, Mob needs to be his own person, and Reagan needs to realize that Mob is his own person, quit relying on him as well for everything. So yeah, I think that it's healthy that they've gone their separate ways for now. And I think that eventually they'll go back to being friends and maybe working together, but it'll be a much different dynamic and it'll be more healthy for it. So I appreciate what One does. I'm also realizing that all of the logos on the phones and computers all said One, which is the mangaka's name, which is great. And yeah, Ritsu's so happy. He's like, hey, you want to play video games for once? And so he introduces Mob to the video games. Like Mob actually gets to hang out with his brother for once instead of being at Reagan's shop, which is really nice, right? And Dimple says, too bad, Reagan. It's your own fault for messing up. And it was Reagan's fault. So I like that he does this yoga with this client, doing this like coastal coral steam yoga. And Reagan's like, thank God there wasn't an actual spirit. Which is amazing. The steam yoga sounds great. And then we see 4 years ago, we flash back where he's like, why am I so surprised though? And we see 4 years ago where he was making the spirits consultation office, spirits and such consultation office. He's making the logo. I basically built this business from the ground up myself. And then we see all the logos and everything that he's been making. Mm-hmm. And I love that he practices the salt throwing. It was like a training montage where he's practicing throwing the salt. What the fudge? Oh my God. So Reagan goes back and he's like, well, I built this business myself before I even met Mob. And so Reagan realizes that he built his own business 4 years ago. I still can't get over the salt throwing where he's practicing throwing the salt. Freaking hilarious. Why would I be in any trouble if Mob decides not to show up? So Mob and Reagan both realize that they've been relying on each other for the wrong reasons. That Mob has been relying on Reagan to help get him out of a pinch if he needed to. And Reagan realizes he's been relying on Mob way too much when he had his own business before. Why does he need Mob now? He says, I just need to continue focusing on jobs I can do myself. He's like, I need to stop relying on Mob for everything. He's like, let me not take on more than I can chew and end up using this kid. Let me do these tasks that I know I myself can take care of. And it's like, mm-hmm. And then he like has the picture and everything. And he's like, I can let the real psychics deal with actual spirits. Reagan's starting to grow up a little bit. He's like, let the real psychics deal with spirits. He's like, I can do these little odd jobs and still get paid and be fine. He's like, I've got a reputation. I can do that. And then I love that he does the Photoshop and everything on it. And he's like, and I can reduce labor costs. But that's not the only thing, though. It wasn't that Mob was just a worker, right? It was like, and it wasn't just that he was hearing about teenage dilemmas. It was that he does miss Mob because he was his friend. He's like, I should use my time to study and learn more about the world. Sure. He's like, oh, I'm becoming rather optimistic about this. So yeah, Reagan's been kind of sad because he's like, yeah, I had this business and everything, but I really liked Mob's friendship. And what I'm hoping is that now that Reagan's realized that, he's going to be like, Mob, I was wrong to use you as a job, but I don't want to lose you as a friend, right? And so I hope that that is addressed later on in this season. But again, I feel like this is a great opportunity for Reagan to maybe meet somebody his own age or an adult. I don't know. Maybe he'll befriend Sho's dad or some members of the Claw. Matsuo is pretty old. Maybe he could find some members of the Claw organization and be friends with them since they're adults. Because yeah, it is, as much as I want Reagan and Mob to like maintain their friendship, Mob is a middle schooler. Reagan, you're 28. You need to move on and get some adult friends and let Mob have his middle school friends and let Mob be a kid and you be an adult. So there needs to be a separation there. So, and I think that this episode is setting that up, but we just haven't gotten there yet, right? And he's like, Mob, you probably weren't expecting this, but I'm not sad about this at all. You're probably feeling pretty lonely right about now. But he's not. That's the thing. Reagan is the one that feels lonely at this point in the episode, and Mob is the one feeling, you know, happy. He's like, I'm mature enough to understand. It's not like I'd even care. Like Reagan's in permanent denial, and then he sees Mob walking with friends. I love Mob's little hoodie with the dog on it. It's great. And so he hides there, and Reagan, poor Reagan, he's just like, we get a shot of that scene where he's just like hiding in the shadows. It looks very much like the manga. Like Reagan goes through like a very pitiful phase in this episode, and where he's looking at, and it looks just like the manga drawing. It's ridiculous. Oh my god. And he's like, Mob looks like he's actually having fun. He has friends? And Dimple's like, what the hell are you hiding for, dumbass? And he's like, oh, Dimple. He's like, I'm not hiding. No, not at all. And he's like, you don't have to worry about Mob anymore. He's having fun. And Reagan has like a self-defense mechanism where when he's upset or sad, he just projects this snarkiness onto others instead of admitting that he's sad, you know, because he doesn't want to admit that he's sad that, you know, Mob's not a friend anymore. And he's like, oh, Mob's not very concerned about you at all. Like, Dimple likes to rub it in his face, too. He's like, it's rather peaceful. He's like, Mob doesn't have to depend on you. And Reagan is just, like, torn up because he's like, what do you mean? He's like, are you okay with this, Dimple? And he tries to throw it in Dimple's face. He's like, well, if he stays away from me, he's not going to use his powers as much. And I'm like, well, we don't know that, first of all, because Claw's in the shadows. We don't know when Show and them are going to strike. I'm sure it'll be conveniently at the end of this season when things go crazy, right? But I'm like, we don't know. Just because you're not around Reagan doesn't mean that he's not going to use his powers, right? Not there. And he's like, do you want him to be an ordinary middle schooler's pet forever? Do you want to be an ordinary middle schooler's pet forever? I guess that would be pretty peaceful. So Dimple throws it in Reagan's face, being like, oh, well, Mom's having a great time with his friends without you around. It's actually kind of peaceful. And he's like, well, do you want things to stay peaceful forever? I thought you were using him. So Reagan knows that Dimple is using Mob just as much as Reagan was as well. And he's like, I think you wanted to use Mob's power to do something. Well, it sucks to be you. It's like, now that Mob's decided to leave such a mundane life, he's of no use to anybody. And I love that he imitates Mob for a second. He's like, I hope you're having fun following around a normal middle schooler. And I'm moving on to the next stage. And Dimple's like, well, glad to see you're doing all right. Cool beans. Bye. But he's like, if you can crack jokes, then I guess there's no need to worry. Who knows? We may never even see each other again. They're going to see each other again, I'm sure. But yes, that is the thing. Is that Dimple seems to be okay for now with where Mob's at. I think Dimple's just happy he doesn't have to deal with Reagan, because Reagan was the biggest thorn in his side up until this episode, and now he doesn't have to worry about him. But I feel like Reagan's just like, well, this sucks, because Mob's doing fine, and Dimple's still around. I feel like Reagan is partially mad at Dimple too, because Reagan's like, well, you're trying to use Mob too, but you get to hang around with him, and I can't. You know, it's one of those, and it's petty like that, right? It's really petty, but that's just the mental state that Reagan's in right now. And I think it's pretty telling that as he goes back to this, like, 2-story apartment complex, the lot right next to it is vacant and for rent, meaning that it's kind of an empty neighborhood. And then we finally get to see his apartment, his little complex. And damn it, Bones. Bones gives us, like, from this point on in the episode, Bones gives us, like, 3 parts of Reagan fan service. And I'm like, no one asked for this, but okay. Sure. And then, yeah. And so he takes off the tie and the jacket, and we see his apartment. And then we see, like, the little sliver of sunlight filtering in to this dark apartment. And it kind of reminds me of the student council presidents, except Reagan keeps a pretty neat apartment. He's got, like, his little coat rack. There's the red skirt and stuff that he wore when he was a schoolgirl. But there's the outfits there, his suits. And then there's, like, a little bookshelf. There's a TV, a tiny table with the tissues. And then his bed and, like, his computer desk with his vest and his water cooler. Like, it's just very, very minimal. And it's very small and tiny, and he's by himself. And so he goes to update his homepage, and then we cut to them going to the karaoke bar, and them dragging him in it. And I love that Reagan's like, I haven't checked Friend Book in a while. And he makes this comment that's like, it's so gut-wrenching. But he says, in this day and age, you can connect with people you know at any time. It's so convenient. And it's such a commentary on how it's convenient as ever to connect, but at the same time, people are disconnected more than ever. It's like you can make all these connections so easily, but the quality of those connections, what are they, right? And so it's such a big commentary on how it's so true that we can so easily connect with people through social media and through technology, but maintaining and keeping those lasting, true connections is really hard. And Reagan doesn't have any of those. And it's really relatable. It's very relatable, right? And the crazy part is this came out in February of 2019, like a year before all the shelter in place and stuff with COVID, when we really all were separated. It's kind of freaky, right? Not saying Reagan caused that, but you know. But then he gets on Friend Book. He says, talk about convenient. And he goes to his messages, and I wanted to read these. He's like, oh, sorry for not reading it sooner. I've been so busy. He's like, who could it be? Maybe it's that one person from high school. And what it is it's like, it's congratulations. Today's your birthday. And he forgot it was his own birthday. And then it says, nobody sent him a happy birthday. Which is really sad, right? And he's like, oh, serious? And when he says seriously, I was like, yeah, because even if you have social media, like usually at least one person says happy birthday, but nobody wishing him a happy birthday. That's so sad. And his birthday, of course, is October 10th. Like, oh my God. And he's like, oh, I got a message. And so it's from his mother. So he looks on there, and that hesitation to open it. So there's lots of things. There's like, spirit photo. I ended up taking one. Can you do something about it? You're a fake. I'll curse you. And then curse. Perv master. We've got a fresh batch of pervy pictures for you. Now you can be a perv master. Oh my God. It's like a spam mail. An exorcism request. Hello, are you a psychic? My body feels so heavy lately. Save me. Kokori-san won't leave my house. Save me, please. And they're all red. He's read all those. I'm like, delete the perv master one. But then he goes to the one from his mom. And he clicks on it and it says, happy birthday. It says, ha ha Ara. So ha ha. The fact that his mother's name is ha ha, or that's her name. Happy birthday. How are you doing? How's work? Are you still in that shady business? Remember our neighbors, the Kobayashis? I heard their oldest son just got married last month. You should hurry up and find a secure job. You still have a chance. You're still only 28. If you want another chance at life, you should probably make a decision fast. Like on his birthday, his mom tells him that he needs to grow up. On his 28th birthday, his mom's like, you need to make some decisions and get a secure job and grow up. There's still time to do it. I'm like, on his birthday! Oh. And then at the bottom, there's this PDF that he sees. And he scrolls down and says, make sure you take care of yourself. Here's my gift to you. And it's a PDF. What parent sends a PDF birthday gift? And we don't see his face. And he hesitates to click it, and then he does. Like he doesn't want to see what his parent is telling him. And then it says the WHITEY recruitment invitation. Looking for staff. No experience, no problem. It says apply by email or fax. A cheerful and fun workplace. Have you ever heard of a company called WHITEY that works hard to make the world a better place to live? If you haven't, let me tell you about our company. It's not a difficult job. It's definitely not an easy job either. But if you have the determination to work hard, we'll welcome you with open arms. So that's really sad. His mom on his birthday sent him an email with a job application and told him to get a job. But he's been doing decent work as a psychic. What the hell? I did feel bad for him in that sense. I was like, damn, Reagan. That sucks. I feel really bad for him. And Reagan just is completely at rock bottom at this point, where he's like his only birthday wish, the only birthday wish he received was from his mother telling him to get a job. So then we cut to Mob and the karaoke thing. I kind of ship the president with the bowl cut guy that kind of looks like Armin from Attack on Titan. I kind of ship her with him because they both sing the karaoke together. And God, I've never related to anyone as much as I've related to Mob in this moment where he's like doing the thing. I have no rhythm. Just so you all are aware, I am Mob with the tambourine with no rhythm. I don't. I'm a coach now for a speech team, and we did warm-ups the other day, and I was like, you guys are going to have to be in rhythm, because I'm not. And I tried my best, but I have no sense of rhythm. None. I have no natural coordination or rhythm. It's just like, there's nothing. Beats, what? I blame it on the fact that our school cut music when I was in 7th grade. That's all I got. I've never related more than I relate to Mob. And they're like, wow, are you and the one guy's like, are you having fun? And he's like, I think so? Like, Mom's like, I think I'm having fun. That's how I feel at karaoke. I cannot sing very well. I have no rhythm. So when we do karaoke, I love watching friends do karaoke. I'm kind of like Mob. I love watching friends do karaoke and picking songs. But if you ask me to get up and sing karaoke, I'm like, unless it's a group ensemble thing, probably not. I have that answer. I think I'm having fun, right? And I love the president's like, you have no rhythm, do you, Mob Coon? And he's like, correct. And meanwhile, I thought for a split second, I thought Reagan was going to show up at the karaoke bar. I thought he was going to show up at the same karaoke bar, but no, it's not time for that. No. Instead, Reagan shows up at the bar. And it's funny that there's a thing called reunion there, but he has his vest on, right? He goes out and I like that Reagan's like going out clothes is this puffer vest and like a pair of khakis. I'm like, that's Reagan's his casual attire. And he goes to the bar called Happy Trails. The guy that says, oh, Arataka-chan, the bartender, he kind of reminds me of Matsuo, just a little bit, right? And he says, welcome, it's been too long. And then they're all like, oh, Reagan-sensei and Reagan-san. And the barflies are there. And Reagan's like, these are all people I've taken advantage of. And he asks for a lemon sour, extra on the sour. And then one guy's like, should you be drinking? The funny thing about it is that Reagan doesn't drink. There was no alcohol in the lemon sour, right? So it was non-alcoholic. That's curious. Reagan actually doesn't drink, but he goes to the bar. He's been to the bar to con people and to make himself feel better in the past, but he doesn't go there to drink. No. And he's like, yeah. He's like, the regulars are a bunch of people who'd fall for pyramid schemes or fake cults. People like that who want someone to vent their troubles to relieve their stress. It's basically a gold mine for someone like me. It's a con artist dream, yeah, and it's just literally a lemon. It's a place where a bunch of weak people gather. And if you've ever hung out at a bar before, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Like, I've gone to like a few bars like to listen to live music or something, but you can tell the regulars, and sometimes, yeah, it's like that. I'm like, damn, Reagan. Like, hear me out, Reagan-san. This really pretty girl talked to me. When I followed her, she led me to some art exhibit. And he's like, yeah, you were just basically taken to a con. And he's like, they're almost like friends to me. But they're not really friends, right? Not really. Because it's like people that you use or that you take advantage of, they're not really your friends. And I feel like at that moment, he kind of realizes what he's been doing to Mob. And he's like, damn it. It's like, shouldn't have been doing that. And so he's like, today's my birthday. And it's like the most anticlimactic birthday thing where the one bartender's like, well, happy birthday. And they're like, oh, happy birthday, sensei. They're like, happy birthday. And that's it. And he's like, thanks. It's the perfect time to bring this up. And then the woman, like, it's his birthday. And the only things he gets for his birthday are like a little clap from the bartender, his mom offering him a job, and this woman trying to sell him an amazing pillow. That was his birthday. Whew. Like, it's really sad. But yeah, he ends up like drinking the whole thing. He's like, Arataka-chan, this is your first drink, isn't it? He's like, your face all red. Are you all right? I think Reagan's just upset at this point, but it's hilarious that it was non-alcoholic and it was one drink and it was enough that Reagan thought he'd had enough. He's like, no. Oh. And he's like, what's wrong? And he's like, I just need my tab. I was like, Reagan, you're not drunk. There was nothing in that. Because I was a little worried that he had been drunk when he left the bar. And he's like, that backfired. I was thinking that I wanted to talk to someone. Anyone. Like he just wanted to be social. And then he realizes he doesn't have any friends. And the guy's like, I didn't even put any alcohol in it. That's what got me. I was like, oh. And it got me because then we see him later. He's throwing up in the alleyway. And I was like, there's no alcohol in that drink. But he's not throwing up because of the alcohol. It's because he's miserable. And I thought it was very poignant that we have the lamp with the 3 moths. And the one moth dies. It reminds me a lot of Mogami. And kind of being at your darkest, lowest point. And that's where Reigen's at. Like he throws up. And there's the moths and stuff there. And he's like, the situation's not good. I'm going in a bad direction. Me, of all people. He's like, what? But wait, me? He's like, what? And then what's interesting is that at that moment, he's like, what am I? And the one moth dies. And he wipes it off. And then he walks away. And we see the moth. He's like, I guess I'm just going to have to become somebody. For a split second, I thought that Reagan like activated psychic powers for a hot second. I was like, because he gets like in his lowest point. But then Reagan, he hits rock bottom and he realizes, wait, I'm Reigen Arataka. I can't hit rock bottom. No. And so he decides to become someone. He's like, I'm Reigen Arataka. I'm the guy that just like talked a bunch of Claw members who are actual psychics out of their nefarious schemes. He's like, I'm not just going to let myself get down to this level. No. And so from there, 6 a.m. he wakes up ready to go. And we get like Reagan fan service as he strips for us. All right. He's like, I ended up alone. After ending up alone and getting over it, Reagan made a huge change. And we see like the water gently caress him. Like Bones was just like, we're going to give you all the fan service you could ever want. So he's like, he decided to make a change. Yeah. He ended up alone and got over it. And then I love that he puts on the suit. He does the Masato Neon Genesis power walk through town like you do. And then, yeah. And he's like, I, Reigen Arataka, shall accept this job as the new Reigen Arataka. And so he started beautifying the city. He like stepped up. He live streamed exorcisms online. I love that there's a Chucky doll. There's the Saw thing. There's the mask. It's like all of the horror things there. He held free seminars and even offered people life counseling. He says, don't tell people personal information they don't need to know. No payments up front. Don't sign any contracts. Vases, holy water, salt, cooling off. Oh my God. And then it says, spirits and such consultation office is wonderful. The man in charge, Reigen Arataka-san, is a true psychic. Because of him, my body feels much lighter and I can feel my luck improving. Reigen Arataka is one of the few real psychics. He listened to me, gave me advice, and I finally met my match. Thank you so much. However, he continued to execute his usual exorcism jobs with vigor. I'm so thankful I can't just stop crying. No one was willing to help me out but Reagan. I just might be falling in love. Oh no! Stray cat of the dawn. Oh no! And then all the satisfied customers. He continued to execute his regular exorcism jobs. And we see all the photos of him. It looks like the one guy looks like Elvis. Like all these characters. Among his most recent jobs, there was a rumor that the player killer from a super popular online game, Fantasy Hell, was actually a ghost. And so it was a difficult job that many other psychics declined to take. Probably because it was going to take way too many hours staying up doing nothing. We asked Shinra, Bonshomaru, what he thought. Bonsho, I was trying to think of his last name, but Shinra. I would think that Reagan and Shinra could become friends, but they live so far apart, it may not be feasible for them to see each other all the time. He's like, I heard of it, but don't even bother. I love that he keeps looking off camera like he's reading something that Reagan is holding up to him to read. Ridiculous. It's not something we can handle. Our spiritual power can't do anything inside a game. Like he's just reading off a card. It was a target that even Mob wouldn't be able to exercise. However, Reagan used multiple accounts and stayed up late many nights. Like, he's got like blood coming out of his nose. And drinking like 5-hour energies. Repeatedly level up and strengthening his weapons. And he baited the ghost player and surrounded it and beat the crap out of him. And succeeded in the exorcism. And then they're like, oh my God. And you're like, but how? And he's like, he looks like a zombie. Well, I am a psychic. But it wasn't even that he was a psychic. It was just that he stayed up and did all the things. He made all these purchases and took all this time to do it that nobody else wanted to spend the time to do it. Oh my God. Because of this successful job, the agency's popularity continued to rise. And instead of like the mob like emotion counter, it's Reagan's popularity and it reaches 100%. Wow. And then the online ghost has finally been exorcised. A true psychic exists. Oh my God. Someone started calling Reagan the bro of Seasoning City. The bro of Seasoning City. Oh my God. What a Chad among Chads, right? Oh my God. And his popularity skyrocketed so much that he got interviewed for a magazine and was then asked to become on a television show. And so then we find out, though, that the TV show has gathered all these detectives, and Judo is one of them. I like the idol. She's just Satake. I like the number 9 earring that she has, but she's just Satake. And then we have Mogi Tatsuya, but the idol just goes by her stage name. That's all we know of her. But oh my God. So Judo has led Reagan there, and they're going to do a live exorcism on the TV show. And Reagan's like, oh, come on now. If I pull this off like a rock star on national TV, then I'll get even more fans. And he's like, I'm nervous, but I'm going to show him what I've got. And then that's exactly what Judo expects him to be thinking. He's like, that ego of yours is going to deflate, you fool. He's like, I set this up. So it seems like Judo has set it up to where Reagan, he's going to have an actual spirit on there, and Reagan's not going to be able to exorcise him, and it's going to reveal him as a fraud, and it's going to ruin Reagan's image. Like he's there to completely deflate Reagan after all this time he's spent this entire episode building himself up. Oh my God. And he tells him, I'll make sure you regret what you've done. I was like, Reagan needs you while you're possessed to save you, you fool. So yeah. So, like I said, this episode, I was really glad. I was really glad that Mob is growing up, and Mob has realized that him and Reagan's relationship was starting to get a little toxic. They need to take a break from each other. And Reagan went through this entire character arc, like Teru in this one episode, just like Teru in season 1 went through like an entire main character's entire series arc in the span of 10 minutes. In the span of 15 minutes, Reagan went through an entire character's series arc and realized that he needed to just become a better person and that he didn't need to rely on Mob anymore. And he's been working towards that and doing really good. And now this guy Judo wants to just completely destroy everything he's been working towards. So, where does that lead us? I don't know. I'm going to be curious to see, like, how is Reagan, because Reagan doesn't have psychic powers. So if there is an actual exorcism and Judo actively chooses to not exorcise to make Reagan do it, where does that leave us and what's going to happen? How is Reagan going to handle that? That's the big question, right? Oh my gosh, y'all. This episode was really good. There was so much going on in this episode. I loved it. I loved the themes. I loved everything about it. And getting Reagan backstory and just the whole 9 yards. But now it's 2-parter. So we got part 2 coming up. So I'm real curious to know your thoughts down below, what you all think is going to happen. Or don't tell me what's going to happen because you all have seen this show. Don't give me any hints or clues or spoilers, please. But I'm curious to know your thoughts about this episode, about Reagan's backstory that we've gotten so far, and all of that. But otherwise, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in episode 7. I hope y'all are too. So, in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. So, if you're on YouTube, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, even if you don't celebrate Christmas. But yeah, next week we'll see what happens in episode 7 of Mob Psycho. Bye.